I think the key implication for us will be the focus on the areas that are favorable to job creation. Implicitly, we put the focus on certain areas. For example, access to finance is very important for us in East Asia and Pacific, and in Asia in general. Now, with the study, we understand better what exactly means the access to finance and how we can improve it and how we can increase it and how we can really take advantage of it. So access to finance in a better light, I would say, will be important. Things like training are also very important in improving the quality of jobs that people receive. And we have been experimenting with and developing advisory projects in training, for example. We have a banking training center that we have developed. But I think that now we can probably measure and appreciate how those initiatives help the job creation and how we can improve on them. The most important really is, first of all, the awareness of what really creates jobs. I think that for the first time with that study, we can put our finger on what are the factors that favor job creation and how we can influence them. And hence, we can probably have a better focus on what will enhance, what will improve the job creation. For example, work on gender issues. Gender is an important area of focus for us. But now we know that having the numbers that women don't have the same access to jobs than men. Women don't have the same access to the quality of the jobs that men have. How can we do to improve that? So I guess it opens up really a whole new area of awareness, of preoccupation, and will make the job obviously more interesting, but also more impactful on how we can really improve the access to jobs. So the first challenge, I think, is things like urbanization. There is rapid urbanization in all the countries in Asia. I can tell you that, for example, China is a place where you see a building start and be raised almost every day. You have areas that are totally in construction. And this is really creating big shift in population. But it also put the focus on what is needed in a city that can accommodate jobs, that can allow people really to be usefully employed, to support their family, to educate themselves, and to grow as individuals. So urbanization is a huge factor. I think that it's important. You may call it a challenge. I think that this is something that we need to take into consideration because this is a deep, it's a phenomenon that's so deep in the growth of certain countries, especially again in a continent like Asia, that it will influence, it will have a deep impact on how those countries are developed going forward. That's one. So urbanization is definitely one of them.
I think when you look at so the global response to IFC's development impact, our work in development impact, and on our results, the shareholders, the IFIs, especially the bilaterals in Western Europe, and also our private companies always look to IFC to lead on key issues. Jobs from a Western European perspective is obviously a key issue at the moment within Western Europe. And so when you look at it from a company's perspective, first of all, the companies are very much saying, well, what can we learn from this? Yes, it's focusing on emerging markets, but what can we learn from this that we can apply to our businesses in Europe? But also when we're looking at articulating our contribution to development in emerging markets, how can we use this work to do that? From a shareholder perspective, obviously focusing on results and economic growth and benefits, they're really looking to say, what does this tell us for the whole jobs agenda? Issues like the quality of jobs, which are the best industries that provide jobs, etc. And then from the DFIs, of course, as you know, a lot of our DFI colleagues really look to IFC to lead in key issues, and then they want to learn from us. Absolutely, yes. It's very much determining, again, you know, I sort of look at the three groups. I haven't even talked about civil society, but from a shareholder perspective, it's driving development agendas. Some European shareholders are much more explicit about saying, if we can create more jobs in emerging markets, then there's less pressure on immigration. Some are looking at it from very much a development perspective. We would like to develop less developed countries, and that's our contribution to development. Jobs is a key part of that. From the company's perspective, as I said, it's really learning from us as to how they can articulate their value to development, but also saying, well, as we're looking at the constraints to jobs within Europe, what can we learn that we can apply within Europe?
Well, I think firstly, you know, I represent manufacturing, agribusiness, and services in Asia. And as you know, Asia is the place where the action is today in terms of growth, and that's also where the poor are, that's where the hungry are, and that's where the population is. So the study, as far as I'm concerned, highlights the value of what IFC can do globally, but particularly in this region. And I think what it does point out from my sector particularly is the linkage effects, that there is the direct job creation, and then there's the indirect job creation, and the multiplier effect can be some 20, 30, 40 times. So, and it's a region where, you know, there's lots of young people. In India, for example, almost half the population in Indonesia is, you know, of the order of less than 25 years old, and they're all looking for jobs, and it's the best way out of poverty. So I think it brings to focus that a lot of what IFC needs to do, through mobilizing others as well, is to focus on job creation as a way out of poverty and improving prosperity. Well, I think one is there's a shortage of skills even in countries like India, China today. And what that does is also create a role for the private sector, because the governments are really constrained in terms of capacity and resources. So one is on the skills building side, and to have people with the right skill set so that they can actually become more employable. And we have been working with clients who are partnering with the private sector to help build skills that are more relevant and applicable for the private sector industry. So that's one important aspect. The second aspect is also to encourage our clients to have better workplaces. So clients, so their employees are working in a safer, more productive, secure environment, and that has a direct link to productivity and then retention of employees. And then, of course, you know, a good job tends to become a better paying job, and again, the way out of poverty. Well, part of the challenge is, again, making all of this happen. And I think as IFC, we can't dictate to our clients that they must employ a certain number of people. That's not what it's about. We want our clients to be efficient, and at the same time we also realize the value of job creation and having the right kind of jobs. So we need to make some strategic choices as to which sectors we want to be in, which will better serve the needs as far as job creation goes. So for example, we've done a few sector studies. We did one, for example, in India in the cement sector, and earlier on we might have been concerned that, you know, this project we financed only created 300 direct jobs. That didn't sound like a lot, but then when we did the study, we realized that the multiplier effect was some 24 times. So I think it is getting that understanding for other sectors, so where we know we can get the best bang for the buck in terms of job creation.
We're delighted with this report because I think one of the things that's pointed out to us is that we needed to better understand how jobs are created and what role we can play in helping to create those jobs. So it is informing us about what impact we're having in the projects we're already doing, and also how we need to change what we're doing to have even a greater impact on jobs. It's the single most important thing for our stakeholders. Well, we're taking the results of these studies to inform our strategies. So, for example, we recognize that jobs are typically created through supply chains. If you set up a manufacturing company, there is a huge supply chain that develops across that manufacturing company that is critical in job creation. So I'll give you one example. We have a roofing company which is operating across a number of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And our approach has been, okay, let's support this roofing company, let's help them grow. And we estimate that they've created about 4,000 jobs. We never bothered to create or to measure what the impact of their supply chain is. And when we did that through the job study, we found that in sourcing their material, in distributing their products, they create almost 24,000 more jobs. So there's a 6-to-1 multiplier. And obviously the multipliers are different according to different industries. And the country conditions are conducive for different industries. Poorer countries, you normally create lower skilled jobs because that is the skill level available in the workforce, but they're able to take one step forward. So the findings of these studies can help us really determine where best to focus our efforts. A couple of the challenges we see is definitely moving countries from one skill level to the next. So it's very important that skills development keeps pace with the aspirations of the country. Fortunately, we have a significant presence in the education and skills area as well. So we're looking to scale that up, and particularly job readiness. So often vocational training is needed. Not everyone needs to have PhDs or master's degrees. A lot of people need basic skills that employers want. So beefing that up is very important. And then, you know, we're all far more conscious about our workplaces and how we operate, whether we employ appropriate safeguards for the people working, whether or not we have certain agreed minimum requirements, for example, absence of harmful child labor, not adversely affecting the environment, fairness of employment for the entire population. Those standards are also critical in terms of job creation, so we look to focus on both of those aspects as we go forward. A couple of the challenges are related to the development of skills. Employers constantly say that one of the key limitations as they try to establish their operations is finding skilled people. Right? So we've got to focus on development of skills. And fortunately, we have a growing practice in the education and skills area. So we're working to try and beef that up as well. Another very important area is making sure that workplace standards, whether it is providing equality of employment. For example, in many of the countries we operate, we find that the proportion of women being employed is far lower than the proportion of women who are being educated to a high level. This is a huge opportunity that employers are missing out on, and it's a shame that they're missing out. So we've got to point that opportunity out and help employers make sure that they get the best qualified workforce for their workplaces. Equally, work standards and making sure that they have safe practices in the workplace, recognition of the environmental impact of their workplaces. Consumers are increasingly concerned about how things are produced, and we want to make sure that our clients stand up to scrutiny in that regard as well.
One of the challenges I would see is the danger of focusing too much on increased jobs, when in fact what we're trying to do is much broader than that. What we're trying to do is to create better conditions for businesses to start, to grow, to develop, and to create jobs. If you focus too much on the job aspects, one might bias decisions towards specific activities that might be more employment intensive, or specific technologies that might be more job intensive, but that might have a cost in terms of longer term growth and longer term job creation. So I think there's a significant trade-off between short term focus on jobs, which can be dangerous in terms of the longer term potential of job creation. So that's where I see the main risk in the job focus. The second one is jobs, as the IFC report and the bank's WDR have pointed out, is a pretty elastic notion. The formal jobs, but they're mostly in the countries we work on, especially in the poorer countries, there's a huge informal sector. And there is employment in the informal sector, but that is not formal employment. So one has to be very careful also when pursuing policies or strategies or programs that try to favor job creation, to look at the aggregate impact, at the overall benefit, and not only at the formal sector employment side. While by and large we will want to have economies and countries formalize and kind of grow their formal sector and gradually reduce their informal sector, in the end, we're concerned about people having employment opportunities, be they formal or informal. So that's another major risk of focusing too much on the formal side of the equation and not enough on the informal side, which may be more important in a number of contexts. IFC's jobs report re-emphasized the importance of a good investment climate, a business environment that is conducive to allowing private sector to come in, to invest, to grow, to create jobs. That's a fundamental aspect of job creation that this report re-emphasized once more. And it stresses the importance of working and focusing on some of the fundamental conditions that will allow companies to come in, to compete, to exit sometimes also if they're not performing, to grow and to create jobs. So going back to the basics, going back to the fundamentals, the need to have a good investment climate, attractive investment climate that encourages people to come in, put their capital at risk, and take the risk also of employing people. So that remains for me really a core reaffirmation of the importance of this business for IFC, for our clients, and for job creation more generally. In terms of the areas that deserve added emphasis, I think we need to look more closely at what combination of reforms, what combination of government activities, actions are most powerful in terms of job creation. So, for example, simplifying business registration a priori is going to be good because it's easier to set up a business. Some people who are already employed somewhere can leave and set up their business more easily. They might be more kind of tempted to do that more easily, but it may not be enough. You may need to combine that with other reforms, like make it easier to hire workers and lay them off when conditions require, to make it easier to access finance, make it easier to import and export. So basically what we need to get better at is understanding what combination of reforms in a specific market is most likely to lead to greater employment and job creation.
Well, the report has some very interesting findings, and in particular I found interesting the parts about what are the impediments to the creation of jobs. And so when we look at those, whether it's access to finance, access to infrastructure, investment climate, these are areas that are very important in what we do in the East Asia Pacific region. So going forward and taking into consideration the findings of the report, we will focus more on these areas, in particular the access to finance and access to finance for women, and helping also the access to infrastructure. Well, I think there's a few areas that we can do more of. One of them, which is very important, is gender and gender finance. And in particular in our region, we're looking at that for the Pacific, where the women are in very difficult conditions in terms of access to jobs. So we want to do more of that. That's one of the areas we want to do. Another area we want to do more is around South-South and helping, in the training side. When we help a company from China, for instance, going and create an asset and a productive facility in another emerging country, for instance in Africa, we want to make sure that by getting engaged, We will help creating the linkages so that people will have jobs, will have opportunities and new trainings and new opportunities to grow in the countries where these investments are done. So this is one of the things we want to do more. One of the challenges we see in our region, and this was raised by President Kim when he came to Beijing recently, is the issue of urbanization. A lot of the poverty in Asia is around urban centers, and this is an area that we need to tackle and we need to do something about. If we can create more jobs in the big cities that we have in Asia, we will do a big, big impact in terms of alleviating poverty and sharing prosperity. Well, I found the report very interesting, and some of the key findings that I thought were very useful and applicable to the region, the East Asia Pacific region where I work, is what are the key obstacles to creation of jobs. And the report identifies access to finance, access to infrastructure, investment climate, and training. And these 4 areas are areas where I think we need to focus more and deliver more. These are areas where we've done quite a lot in the region, in the East Asia Pacific region. But going forward, we will focus more thanks to the findings of this report.
So we're very glad to see the impact that the financial sector had on job creation and to see this confirmed through this study. We were also delighted to see the in-depth study that was undertaken with one of our clients, City Commercial Bank in Sri Lanka, which gave an in-depth view as to what sectors were being supported and what the impact was on job creation. So overall, it gave us a good confirmation about the importance of the financial sector in job creation. Primarily more of, and the key focus for us will be small and medium-sized enterprises. As we've seen through the job study and also the WDR report on jobs, about 80–90% of all jobs are created in the private sector, and SMEs play a particularly important role in emerging markets to create jobs. So our focus will be to work through financial institutions to reach small and medium-sized enterprises to help them create jobs. And among the 2 top priorities and constraints that SMEs are facing are access to infrastructure and access to financial services. So one of the key challenges for us still is to continue to create the evidence that we need to understand where our interventions really make a big difference and where we should channel our funding and resources to make a difference. I think the job study is a very good first step. It confirms the general direction, but I think we have to become much more granular to be able to distinguish which types of intervention really give us the biggest bang for the buck. And here we have to work very closely with our clients so that they can help us collect data, see what the impact is, and see how we can improve how we, through our clients, can make a difference for jobs creation.
The challenges at the base of the pyramid are often the lack of access to financing and lack of capacity. IFC can provide access to finance throughout the value chain and implement targeted capacity building.
Well, I'm covering financial markets, and financial market is a critical actor in helping basically the development of a country. And this finding has highlighted the role that the bank and financial institution has in, on one side, helping the growth of the SME space. On the other hand, is to help basically making people bankable, so that by doing so, facilitating them entering in the entire space of formalized business. I think that IFC has to work together with the clients in, first of all, make them understand what are, within their economies, the critical factor that they will help job creation. And specifically in the space of financial market, the importance of, on one side, financial market infrastructure, so the different type of factors apart from the banks, like credit bureaus, like payment systems. But more importantly, in focusing them, what are the key sectors to support that they will be drivers for the growth of the economy, and how to support this sector in a way in which they will create jobs. So on this challenges side, there are several. Probably the most important that we are facing from a financial market point of view is to look at what it really means inclusive growth in terms of job creation. And we have to ask ourselves if the financial institutions are effectively providing the right type of support in relation, for instance, to the SME sectors and or to critical industries that are operating in the different countries. I gave you an example. Usually people think about industries only in terms of production capacity or producing goods. But what about the service industry? What about the importance of having a proper education, maybe vocational education, that is critical for basically allowing the job market to grow?
The jobs agenda is very much at the center of the global development agenda. And what SBA does to support it is 3 or 4 things. One, we work with SMEs. We work with strengthening SMEs and their supply chains in order to create jobs, quantity of jobs, both for men and importantly for women. We also have a very new initiative that we launched a couple of years ago that we're now actioning, which is the E for E, or Education for Employment Initiative. Initially, we're doing it in the MENA region, but frankly, if it works, we'll replicate it and scale it up globally. And it's all about creating people's skills to meet a given job market. Because sometimes you have jobs, but you don't have the skills to match them. So you really have to work on the supply and demand sides. And finally, we are very strongly looking at the whole gender agenda within the jobs narrative, which is around making sure that there's equal opportunities for both men and women, because otherwise we'll be ignoring 50% of the workforce of a country if we don't take into account the gender agenda. SBA covers the creation of sustainable businesses, right? Sustainable businesses have to be growth-oriented, but at the same time they have to be inclusive. And for both those reasons, we work with various entities in the job market, which include, for example, supply chains, it includes SMEs, and it includes the actual individual himself or herself in terms of being trained and having the skills to enter the job market. Jobs for SBA create the foundation on which we build our business. I'll give you an example. Take gender, for example, and the impact that gender has on jobs. 50% of the workforce of the world is female. If we don't give them equal opportunities to males, then we will be losing out from 50% of the value add of a total workforce. What SBA has done in that is that we are creating business models for including gender positive actions in companies. Winvest is an example of that. Winvest essentially takes best practices and lessons learned from companies that we work with to make a business case for other companies to hire more women. We also create women leaders by making sure that boards contain more women on them as opposed to not. The challenges to the jobs agenda lie in 2 areas as far as I can see. One area is simply in having the right skill set amongst youth particularly, but everybody in the workforce, to meet the demand that employers have. If you don't have the right skills, for example, as is the case in the Middle East and North Africa, where we are currently focusing our Education for Employment initiative, basically what we're seeing is employers are saying, we have jobs. We need to create more jobs for growth and productivity, but we don't see the skills, the appropriate skills in the workforce. So that's one challenge. Right now we're looking at MENA, but frankly globally, if you look at some of the countries, the less developed countries, that is an issue. The second challenge that I see is that yes, we're all focused on creating more jobs, but a very quick second issue is going to be the quality of the job, the quality of work. And if we don't pay attention to that, that is going to result in the jobs agenda being negatively impacted. So what are we doing in SBA? We have partnered with the International Labour Organization on the Better Work Initiative. The Better Work Initiative essentially works with factories and employers to create better work conditions for workers. At this point, for example, we're working in the apparel industry where many of the workers, a large percentage are women, and the Better Work program just makes it a better place for them to work. So those are the two challenges that I see, and SBA hopefully will be able to address them.
Well, I think the first major implication is for Africa, and is in line also not just with the IFC jobs report, but the other high visibility piece that's come out around the same time, which is the McKinsey report on jobs for Africa. And the big thing there is just the size of the numbers. The number of jobs that the continent is predicted to need over the next couple of decades is roughly 4 to 5 times the size of the current formal job market today in Africa. So the scale of this issue is absolutely huge for Africa in particular. So I think where the IFC jobs study is quite useful is in helping us figure out at a strategic sense, strategic level, what are the kind of interventions that are likely to have a higher payoff on the job side, and then become an important part of thinking and adjusting our strategy over the next several years as we try and help Africa face this next big issue. It's really, another way to think about it is it's the number of people talk about the demographic dividend for Africa being something that is a very positive element, and it certainly is, as a major contributor to the economic growth that Africa has seen over the last several years. But it's a two-edged sword as well, because all of these people who will be coming into the labor force, young people who will be coming into the labor force, and create the kind of age structure ideally you want in terms of how many people are productively employed relative to the older parts of the population that are depending on depending on social safety nets and revenue generated by people of working age. That's a good thing unless you don't have the jobs for the people who are working age. So I think finding a way to help our African member states deal with this issue is up very high on the priority list for IFC. And on Latin America, it also has important implications in a slightly different way. The strategic challenge for Latin America is creating jobs that continue moving along the value chain and not getting stuck in the middle income trap, as a number of economists refer to it. And also ensuring that the large parts of the region which are not participating in the economic growth of the last couple of decades are able to begin participating more. So for us here, the job study has implications about what do we do in particular in the frontier markets of Latin America. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the big answer for Africa is we should do more of 3 specific things. One is continue to scale up the investment climate work, because that's the obvious one to try and open up the field more for private investors to come in and do job creation. A second is doing more of something we already do a lot of, and we already do a lot more than we did even 2 years ago, and that's contributing to more power generation and more access to power across Africa, because lowering factor costs is the key to creating a growing economy and indirect creation of jobs. And in Africa, it's very clear that electric power is the biggest deficit in that. So more investments in the power sector. And third, something that is newer to us, and that's supporting vocational training, and specifically skills building to allow more Africans to take advantage of the opportunities being created by the private sector as they come of age and enter the labor force. In Latin America, I would have said what we need to do more is on a geographic basis and be more focused on the frontier markets of the region, as already our regional management team has been guiding the program towards.
The last one is, what are some of the challenges you see and how can they be addressed?
I think there are plenty of challenges. One is around the issue of indirect versus direct job creation. We do engage in several activities that have a direct impact on job creation, but we also have a large number of activities, probably a significantly larger one, where the impact is indirect. So we have to be careful not to get too caught up in skewing our activities towards things that have just the direct element of job creation and leave behind activities that may have a much larger but indirect impact. And an obvious one is we should not take the growing focus on job creation to mean anytime you have a project which in the short run may actually reduce jobs. Obvious ones would be restructurings of infrastructure projects, typically that would have been in the public sector before and are transitioning to the private sector. Those are often accompanied by job losses during the transitional period. So being able to be clear that we want to contribute more to job creation generally, not only through direct investments, is one big challenge. A second one is just that because we haven't thought clearly about the jobs lens, we only have a relatively peripheral idea about multiplier effects. So when we invest in a particular type of business, we have a clear sense of how many jobs are directly created, but the indirect job creation is something we don't really have as good a handle around. We have a handle around or an idea about what happens in terms of induced jobs creation, as the report talks about it. But the multiplier effects, which are the indirect job creation, vary a lot from sector to sector, and that's something we really have not had much focus on. So investing in areas, for example, the first investment we've just made in the film industry, which sounds initially to some of our board members, maybe that's not so developmental, but where there's a multiplier effect of 7 jobs, 7 indirect jobs for each one. That's the kind of thing that has a significant impact that we need to get a better handle on.
One against the other. And could you give some more examples?
Of course. Each region is different, and then within regions you tend to have quite significant differences. But at the broad regional level, the big challenge in Africa is just the sheer number of the jobs. And no other region anywhere in the world is going to create as many job requirements as Africa. The labor force in Africa is predicted now within a couple of decades to become larger than the labor force either of China or of India. So the sheer scale is probably the biggest challenge in Africa. Whereas in Latin America, for example, again, the challenge is more geography specific within the region and is more towards how does the region continue to create continually higher end jobs as people move, as the economies move up the spectrum of value creation, and therefore one is able to create continued income growth and bring more people into the higher ends of the into middle income classes.